Hi, my name's Carter, and I've spent the past year working on a machine that can walk. It's also made completely out of things that I found in dumpsters. This video was a lot harder to make than I thought it would be, and I'm pretty sure I got bronchitis for it. So, please enjoy. Albert Einstein once said, if you want to build a walking machine, it's best to use a Jansen linkage. He never said that, and I'm actually pretty sure it's not true after finishing this project. But they're really cool. They're invented by a Dutch artist named Theo Jansen in 1990, and he uses them to create all these crazy mechanical creatures that walk on the beach. The cool thing about the Jansen linkage is that you can turn this crank in the middle and it starts walking like an artificial leg. There aren't any motors or electronics in it, it's literally just because of the shape of the pieces that it can move like this. So, in theory, we can take 4 of these and then put me in the middle to crank them all like a bicycle, and it should just start walking. Just to be safe though, I'm going to make a prototype really quickly, and I don't think it should be that hard. It was very hard. I started recording these little check-ins, and as you can see, good morning, I did not sleep last night. Things were not going very well. The very first prototype I made was this little popsicle stick guy, which was cool and all, but he suffers from the fatal flaw of being made of screws. This means that when I turned the coat hanger that powered him, half of his joints would unscrew themselves until they fell off, and the other half would tighten themselves until I couldn't turn it anymore. But I figured even if it does unscrew itself, it would still be cool to see it walk at least for a little bit. And so I bought a remote-controlled car and started to take it apart. But the car started smoking for some reason. Which I don't really understand how it started smoking, because it was off, but... C'est la vie. Yeah, the car doesn't work anymore. So I started working on a 3D printed prototype. It took a second to make because I had to get used to the CAD software, and I wrote like a little bit of code to figure out the dimensions. But once I figured out my 3D printing tolerances, I got to this leg. It showed me that there's a couple positions where the leg can lock itself up, and if the leg does get locked up in this way, instead of trying to walk when you turn the crank, it'll start to tear itself apart, which is not very convenient for a walking robot. But I kept that in mind and kept working on other 3D printed versions for maybe the next month. And what I'd do is in the mornings, I'd go to my school's free 3D printers, I'd print something, and then come back and realize it doesn't work at all. After around a month of trial and error, the occasional thing that fell apart, I finally got to these legs, which were good enough to start working on a real prototype. But they still needed some source of power, which, unfortunate for Greg here, was a robot toy lizard that I got from Target. After what may be the most unhinged hour of my entire life, I finally had a working prototype. And it's really cool. It uses the lizard for power, it's got big feet for balance, and it's got little paper clips on the sides to keep it from locking up. With the prototype working, I was finally able to start working on the real thing. The very first step of working on the real thing is material acquisition. And since materials are expensive and trash is free, everything in this robot is going to be built from stuff that I find in a dumpster. It's a bad decision. But Carter, is dumpster diving even legal in the state of Georgia? I don't know. But what I do know is that vinesomething.com says probably. So, very stupid. Perfect. Now make a thumbnail face. This is my little brother Cooper. He's standing on top of my dad's truck and really helped with the dumpster diving process. Let's do one more thumbnail face for the real ones. Good. Don't use that. You don't think this is good? Decided to, I'll never ever lie to you. Sorry. I'll get back to the video. After a very successful day of dumpster diving, my dorm room was completely full of trash. In an effort to be able to walk on the floor again, I started to mark and measure my materials. Then, I'd cut them at my quote-unquote workshop, which is this picnic table that I drag behind a building. I drilled some holes at the invention studio, and pretty quickly I had the beginnings of a leg. It turns out that just the one day of dumpster diving was not nearly enough trash, so I started to fall into this routine where I'd cut and measure and drill and do more dumpster diving. I even found an exit sign in the trash, which me and my roommate did light up, but it was pretty dubious.
Don't pull it. What the fuck?
Then the semester ended and I moved back to my house, so I started using the garage and basement. The fluorescent lights that Cooper and I found had electrical ballast in them, which I don't really know what an electrical ballast is, but they have lots of wire attached to them, and the wire is pretty rigid. So I used it with the pipes to connect joints together. I would wrap the wire around the ends of a pipe and then duct tape it on. Once I put everything together, I immediately realized that this was a terrible idea, and I started to replace all the duct tape and wires with screws. Wow, a completely unused kit of screws in the dumpster. I mean, who would throw something like that away? After I found the screws, I started to replace all the old connections. Every single time I wanted to put a screw through a pipe, I'd have to mark the hole and then hammer an indentation on the mark so the drill doesn't slide off the pipe, and then I'd drill the hole on this mango box. Once I replaced all the dumb connectors with better ones, it did make the leg better, but it didn't work quite yet. I was trying to turn the leg with this crank that relied on a single wood screw, which did go poorly. After I switched the crank out and did a whole bunch of other things to the legs, I finally got it to take kind of a step. This was the first time I'd felt hope for the project in a very long time. I know it's only been 6 minutes for y'all, but it'd been a couple months for me at this point, and I was only a week away from my sponsorship deadline. But I kept my head up and kept looking for trash, which led me to some really beautiful places, like this hole full of energy drinks. And I found a shopping cart, which I promise I did not steal from anybody. It was upside down and covered in moss, and took about 15 minutes to get out of the hole it was in. But it did end up being very, very helpful. I kept dumpster diving and kept working, and slowly and steadily the robot started to come together pretty well. It was really cool to look back every once in a while and see just how far the project has come. Eventually, I was ready to put everything together. Over the course of a couple hours, me and Cooper used wood screws to fasten everything together. And for the final reveal, it looked terrible. I mean, just awful. It seemed almost impossible that it would ever work, but I spent a long time trying to tighten everything and replace parts, and add the little stabilization so the legs didn't lock up or anything. And on the very first day when I got it to stand up on its own, I decided it would never work. By this point in the video, my friends and family had all been asking for a while, why don't you just make a video about how you failed to make a robot? And to some extent they are right. You know, it's easy to take all this and glorify a process by which we make our dreams a reality. But take the music away and I'm cobbling trash together in my parents' basement. But for better or for worse, the video is not over, and I started over completely. I went out, got more trash. I marked everything, cut it, drilled it. I was taking everything serious this time. I made wood end caps for the pipes to hold the joints together. Everything was looking a lot better than the first time. Some of the pieces were too thick, so I had to cut the middle out partially by hand on all 4 legs. The difference between the new and old robot was quickly becoming very, very night and day. But I kept working, and pretty soon all I needed was a handle and some feet. On this first handle, the L pieces sheared apart, and I couldn't exactly tell what was wrong with the feet, but performance was not ideal. Also, I had to take it apart like 50 times because I kept building stuff that looks like this and expecting it to work somehow. I brought my friend Eric over to help once, and he said that every single time I cut or drilled anything, it looked like I was doing an OSHA violation. But I'm my own employer, so all bueno. He is right a little bit. I will admit some of the setups I used to cut things were unsafe at best. And I did spill paint a couple times using paint buckets to hold things up. I kept falling off the robot, and I kept taking it apart, as well as taking all the feet off this time. After a while, I realized that it works really good off the ground, but as soon as I put it on the ground, it completely stops working. As far as I can tell, the big problem is that I'm just not strong enough to turn the crank in the middle while it's on the ground. Lucky for me, my roommate last year had a terrible bike that could not break. They got a new bike, and for science left the old one behind our dorm all summer to see if somebody would steal it, and nobody did. Bikes have gears, which can create a lot of mechanical leverage for us. So I took the bike and sawed it in half. Then I fixed the gears where they were by screwing in this cable, and I attached it to the robot with a nightmare combination of pipes. One of the times that I fell off the robot broke one of the pipes pretty bad, so after one last time of taking the robot apart, voila, it works. I did try to get a better video of it working, but it broke, and I can't really fix it because this clip was taken the night before the first day of class for a new semester. But I'm overall pretty happy with the project. I think it was pretty fun, and thanks for watching. I really thought that this project was only going to take like 2 or 3 months. But y'all, I've had a crazy year. So I just want to say to anybody having a hard time or anything, please just keep your head up and things get better.